January 29th, 2022. Canton, Massachusetts. It was a town that could have been plucked straight from a postcard. Quaint, tree-lined streets, a close-knit community where neighbors knew neighbors, and a deep-seated trust in local law enforcement. That morning, a pristine, heavy snowfall had blanketed everything, transforming the suburban landscape into a hushed, idyllic scene. But beneath that fresh, pure white, a horrifying secret was buried, about to be unearthed. At the center of this unfolding tragedy were two people. John O'Keefe, a respected Boston police officer, a man admired by his colleagues and friends, and Karen Reed, his girlfriend, a sharp financial analyst, seemingly living a comfortable life. They were a couple, navigating the ordinary challenges and joys of life in this quiet New England town. The night leading up to the discovery was like many others for John and Karen. They'd been out with friends, enjoying the easy camaraderie of a Saturday night. Their last stop was an after-party at the home of Brian Albert, another Boston police officer, and his family. The house, bustling with familiar faces, seemed like a safe, convivial place. Outside, however, the heavy snowfall intensified, transforming into a blinding blizzard, making roads treacherous and visible. Karen later claimed she dropped John off at the Alberts' house around 1 a.m., believing he would simply go inside, and then she drove away. Hours later, as the blizzard raged and the world was still cloaked in the pre-dawn darkness of Sunday, the alarm bells began to ring. John hadn't returned. He wasn't answering his phone. Karen, gripped by a mounting panic, frantically called friends. Along with Jennifer McCabe and Carrie Roberts, they drove back to the Alberts' house, fighting against the whiteout conditions, their headlights barely piercing the swirling snow. And then they saw it. Lying partially covered in the pristine, unforgiving snow just outside the Alberts' house was John O'Keefe's unresponsive body. The immediate scene was pure chaos. Shock, disbelief, desperate pleas filled the freezing air. John was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. He was pronounced dead. The initial medical findings sent a jolt through the already reeling community. John O'Keefe had died from hypothermia and blunt force trauma. His body bore significant injuries consistent with being struck by a vehicle and left exposed to the deadly cold. Karen, distraught and seemingly incoherent, was immediately a central figure in the nightmare. The town of Canton, Massachusetts, was plunged into a nightmare, utterly unable to comprehend how one of their own, a respected officer, could meet such a brutal end in their quiet, snow-covered streets. The initial questions were simple. What happened to John? Who could possibly be responsible? But the answers would prove to be anything but simple. The shock that ripped through Canton quickly morphed into a chilling focus. Immediate attention turned to Karen. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts, swift and resolute, began to build its case against her. Their narrative was stark and tragic. Karen, after an argument with John O'Keefe, had intentionally, or at the very least recklessly, struck him with her large SUV, then left him to die alone in the brutal blizzard. It was a picture of domestic dispute turning fatal, betrayal wrapped in a blanket of snow. The prosecution wasted no time in presenting what they considered to be irrefutable evidence. The most damning piece was the broken taillight from Karen's white Lexus SUV. Fragments of red and clear plastic, undeniably from a vehicle, were found scattered near John's body in the snow. They meticulously showed how these pieces matched the damage on Karen's vehicle, implying a direct, violent collision. Adding to this, glass shards, also consistent with vehicle damage, were found on John's clothing, suggesting he was either struck or dragged by the vehicle. Then came Karen's own words. Her statements to friends and first responders in the frantic hours after finding John were heavily scrutinized. She was distraught, incoherent at times, but several witnesses testified to hearing her utter phrases like, "I hit him," or "I did this." These admissions, though spoken in a state of extreme distress, became cornerstones of the prosecution's argument, painting a picture of a confession, however fragmented. Her early morning phone calls and texts to John, and her increasingly frantic attempts to locate him, were presented as evidence of the dawning realization of what she had done, her panic. The autopsy findings further solidified the prosecution's theory. Medical examiners concluded that John O'Keefe's death was a result of a combination of hypothermia and blunt force trauma. His injuries, including a fractured skull, multiple lacerations, and severe bruising, were deemed consistent with being struck by a vehicle. The conclusion was damning. He had been hit, likely by Karen's SUV, and left to succumb to the freezing temperatures. The weight of this evidence, coupled with the initial chaos and Karen's own distraught reactions, culminated in her arrest and subsequent charge of second-degree murder. The quiet town of Canton was utterly stunned. The narrative seemed clear to them: a passionate argument between a couple, a reckless act in the dead of night, and a tragic, fatal outcome. But beneath the surface of this seemingly straightforward case, unsettling questions were already beginning to form, questions that would soon rip the community apart. The prosecution had laid out their case, but the full, strange, dark, and mysterious truth was far from revealed. Chúng ta đã xem xét kỹ lưỡng vụ án của bên công tố chống lại Karen Reed. Giờ là lúc câu chuyện chuyển hướng một cách mạnh mẽ, khi bên bào chữa trình bày một giả thuyết hoàn toàn khác, làm dấy lên nghi ngờ về một sự chờ đợi. The Karen Reed trial, snow, lies, and a divided world. Just as the public began to settle into the narrative presented by the commentary, Karen Reed's legal team, spearheaded by the formidable attorney Alan Jackson, launched an explosive counter-narrative. It wasn't just a defense, it was a bombshell accusation of a cover-up, claiming Karen was being framed. The picture of a tragic accident dissolved, replaced by something far more sinister and calculated. The defense's central theory was chilling. John O'Keefe, they argued, was not simply left in the snow after being hit by Karen's SUV. Instead, he was brought inside the Alberts' house after being dropped off. There, he was allegedly assaulted by someone else at the party, suffered his fatal injuries, and was then moved back outside into the blizzard to die, turning the entire scene into a calculated deception. To support this radical claim, the defense meticulously picked apart the prosecution's evidence, highlighting glaring inconsistencies. They pointed to the surprising lack of blood in the snow where John's body was found. Despite suffering massive head injuries, the amount of blood was minimal, suggesting he wasn't simply left there immediately after being struck. More unsettlingly, the defense introduced medical experts who testified that John's body bore injuries inconsistent with a simple hit and run. Specifically deep scratches and bruises that, they argued, resembled those from a dog attack. The Alberts, it was noted, owned a large, powerful dog. The focus of the defense quickly shifted to the inner circle present at the after-party: the Alberts, Jennifer McCabe, and Carrie Roberts. They alleged that these individuals, many of whom were connected to law enforcement, engaged in a conspiracy to frame Karen to protect one of their own, or someone else entirely. The discovery of suspicious deletion of phone data by key witnesses, including texts and calls made in the hours following the incident, fueled these suspicions, painting a picture of deliberate concealment. Furthermore, the defense pointed out contradictory statements from various witnesses regarding the exact timeline of events that fateful night, sowing seeds of doubt about their credibility. While the defense never definitively named a third-party culprit responsible for John's injuries, they strongly hinted at the possibility that someone else at the party was involved, and that Karen was merely a convenient scapegoat. The idea that a respected police officer could be involved in such a cover-up was explosive. The repercussions of this defense strategy were immediate and profound. It resonated deeply with a significant segment of the public, igniting massive protests and giving rise to fervent online movements like Free Karen Reed. The case transcended a simple criminal trial, morphing into a public battleground where trust in law enforcement and the justice system itself was fiercely debated. The town of Canton, once a picture of quiet suburbia, was now deeply, bitterly divided, caught in a swirling storm of suspicion and conflicting narratives. The lines between victim and perpetrator, truth and lies, blurred beyond recognition. The Karen Reed trial wasn't just another criminal proceeding. It quickly exploded into a national phenomenon, captivating audiences far beyond the quiet streets of Canton. This wasn't merely a courtroom battle. It was a media circus fueled by the insatiable appetite of social media, where every shred of evidence, every witness testimony, and every legal maneuver was dissected, debated, and often distorted. The trial's rapid ascension to viral status was unprecedented. Courtroom live streams garnered millions of views. Daily commentary from legal analysts and citizen journalists flooded platforms like X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Independent true crime bloggers and podcasters, notably the controversial Turtle Boys blog, became major players, often breaking news or pushing their own theories with a fierce, unwavering bias that often outpaced traditional media outlets. These platforms blurred the lines between reporting and activism, transforming casual observers into fervent participants. This intense public scrutiny quickly led to a deep, bitter polarization. The online world cleaved into two warring factions, the truthers and the believers. The Karen Reed truthers coalesced into a powerful, dedicated online army. They meticulously scoured every detail, shared theories, organized protests outside the courthouse, and vehemently challenged the prosecution's narrative. They often clashed directly with those who remained convinced of Karen's guilt, leading to heated arguments and personal attacks. Every witness who took the stand found themselves under an unbearable spotlight. Their testimonies were not just heard by the jury, but dissected, analyzed, and furiously debated by millions online. This intense public scrutiny inevitably led to accusations of perjury, witness intimidation, and even manipulation, turning witness credibility into a central battleground, both inside and outside the courtroom. The pressure on these individuals was immense, often spilling over into real-world threats and harassment against witnesses, prosecutors, and law enforcement officers. It was a chilling illustration of the dangerous unchecked power of social media when a high-profile trial becomes its central focus. The Karen Reed case transcended the boundaries of a legal proceeding. It morphed into a cultural phenomenon, a battleground for competing narratives, deep-seated suspicions, and the very nature of justice itself. It became a crucible where public opinion, fueled by online outrage and fervent belief, wrestled with the intricate, often frustrating processes of the legal system. The outcome, whatever it would be, seemed destined to satisfy only a fraction of those who had become so deeply invested in the saga of the officer in the snow. After weeks of gripping testimony, conflicting narratives, and a public utterly captivated, the jury in the Karen Reed murder trial finally delivered their verdict. The world held its breath. When the word came down, whether guilty or not guilty, the courtroom erupted, and the news reverberated across every screen, every conversation. For John O'Keefe's grieving family, it was either a semblance of justice or another layer of pain. For Karen Reed, it meant either a life behind bars or a long, arduous journey of rebuilding a reputation shattered by accusation. Regardless of the verdict, the immediate aftermath was a maelstrom of emotion. Cheers or shouts of outrage filled the streets outside the courthouse. But for many, despite the legal conclusion, the truth remained elusive, shrouded in doubt and the bitter cold of that January. The trial may have ended, but the lingering questions refused to be silenced. What exactly happened to John O'Keefe? Was it truly a hit and run, as the prosecution vehemently argued? Or was he brought inside the Alberts house, assaulted, and then left for dead, as the defense dramatically contended? The conflicting witness testimonies, the suspicious deletion of phone data, the intense scrutiny of every minor detail, all contributed to a deep sense of unease. Why was there so little blood in the snow if he was hit outside? What about the mysterious dogfight? For every answer the trial seemed to provide, it unearthed a dozen more unsettling questions. The most profound impact of the Karen Reed trial was arguably on the town of Canton itself. This once quiet, trusting community was irrevocably divided. Friendships shattered. Families found themselves on opposite sides of a bitter chasm of opinion. Trust in local institutions, particularly the police department and the very justice system meant to protect them, was severely eroded for many. The very fabric of the town seemed frayed, torn apart by suspicion and competing loyalties. The Karen Reed trial will undoubtedly go down as a landmark case in American history. Not just for its dramatic courtroom clashes or its highly anticipated outcome, but for the stark light it shone on several unsettling realities. It exposed chilling allegations of police misconduct and potential corruption, forcing a national conversation about accountability within law enforcement. It highlighted the immense, often dangerous, power of social media to shape public opinion, influence narratives, and even incite harassment in high-profile cases. Ultimately, the trial left a lingering shadow of doubt. For some, a sense of justice was finally served. For others, it cemented the belief that a grave injustice had occurred. The full, unvarnished truth of what happened to John O'Keefe remains, for many, a mystery still partially buried under the snow. The Karen Reed trial stands as a chilling reminder that sometimes, even after the gavel falls and the verdict is read, the story is far from over, and the truth itself can remain obscured. A strange, dark, and mysterious whisper